Mistakes, we have all made them, and if you're looking to dive into the TCG hobby that's spreading like wildfire in game stores around the world, this is the video for you. I'm going to go over 5 mistakes that I've seen or made myself when I was getting into this industry that you can avoid to better your experience when you're picking up cards for the first time or getting back into it. I'm Nick with TCG HQ, and as someone who's been in this industry for 12 years, I'm old. I've seen a thing or two about what and what not to do when you're getting into card games. Whether that's picking up the hobby for the first time or trying out the hot new card game everyone's talking about, there's a ton of stuff I've experienced that I wish I could undo, and today I'll go over all of them. This is 5 TCG mistakes I wish I knew sooner. At number 5, let's talk about trades. In this industry, especially with how juiced up and valuable certain games are right now, cards carry a premium. Whether it's because not enough of a game is in print, a la Gundam, or there's a ton of demand for mass-printed cards, as in Pokemon, the game pieces that you might use or open in booster boxes carry a price tag sometimes. I highly recommend having a trade binder with you and taking it to tournaments to trade before or in between games. That being said, in order to know what you're talking about and secure good trades for yourself, you need to keep in mind the market value of cards that you're looking to trade away and the ones you're looking to get for your own collection or your deck. When I was first getting started with card games, very often players would go for one-to-one trades of cards in the same rarity if both players needed each other's cards. This was before TCG Player was a really big deal, and we were only really working off eBay sales and in-store transactions to determine what a card was worth. Nowadays, TCG Player, eBay, Facebook Marketplace even, Discord groups, and many other resources are at your disposal to figure out how much a card is worth. You want to make sure that you protect yourself whenever you're doing a trade so that you're able to get value out of it yourself and you're able to avoid any potential lopsided deals that see you parting ways with some of your super valuable cards in your collection and only getting a meager amount in exchange. While card value doesn't need to be everything in a trade, in 2025, it's important to keep in mind just how much you're bringing with you in your trade binder when you go to locals. Speaking of trade binders, let's talk about our next point. Number 4. A constant debate between players of all games is what supplies do you use to protect your cards? A lot of people are diehard Katana sleeve fans, or Dragon Shield enjoyers, or heavy play enthusiasts. When I was first getting into the hobby, I spent a lot of money on $3 packs of sleeves that tore at the edges and weren't great investments in protecting my cards. I'd recommend doing research first about what sleeves to buy, typically of one of the 3 brands I mentioned at the top of this section. GameGenic and Eclipse are also 2 solid brands. At Cards HQ, we stock Dragon Shields primarily, but we also have GameGenic, a brand that I'm personally quite fond of. Also, a good trick that I took way too long to catch on to is instead of buying a bunch of different colors of sleeves for your decks, to make life easier for you and the many decks you may or may not build, I'd buy 10 packs of the same sleeves and call it a day. I know that sounds like a lot, but in the long term it's going to save you time and money. That way, if you're ever playing 2 different competitive decks, or even 3 or 4 week in and week out at, say, a Lorcana local, or a local for any other game, you can swap your staples between these decks easily when you want to make tweaks if both decks share these expensive staple cards. Because they have the same sleeves and they're both being played regularly, you won't have to spend any extra time between events sleeving and de-sleeving a couple cards in your decks before you're ready to go to the next tournament. Also, please, do not buy a 3-ring binder. Those are for school, not for cards. Binder rings historically have damaged cards far more than they protected them by dinging them whenever you turn the pages over them, causing indents in the cards and making them damaged and unplayable. Go for a binder with bound pages, like this one from GameGenic, that will store 24 different cards on the pages and will save your cards from getting binder dings. Number 3. The art of the spec. This point applies primarily to games that are not Pokemon, but Pokemon collectors and speculators have likely also participated in this and may appreciate some of the points in this section. Speccing on a card refers to buying a bunch of copies of it for cheap, typically no more than $1, and waiting to see if it'll go up and turn a profit. While many of us only play card games for the fun of it, this is a big part of our industry and you may be tempted to participate in it too. While I wouldn't swear it off as a behavior, and in some points I'd even encourage it, it's definitely something I've done where I didn't handle it smartly, and I think you could avoid making that same mistake. Let's take a look at a spec that was pretty obvious when it happened a few years ago. Ledger Shredder from Magic's Streets of New Capenna set. Ledger Shredder is a fairly unassuming rare from SNC that lets you connive when a player casts their second spell every turn. When Streets released in February of 2022, this card was sitting in the bulk bin for about $1 on release weekend. However, if you were involved in the modern format metagame at the time, you knew that this card was a house, giving you access to card draw, discard, and pumping your Ledger Shredder. If you were playing the modern format, you knew this card would not stay at $1 for long. Not only this, but he's decent in Commander 2, helping the price bubble up. Within a few weeks of the set's release, it was $20, a chase rare of the set, in a set that didn't really have a lot of value, so Ledger Shredders were not being opened either. So that meant that if you had some Ledger Shredders that you had purchased or had opened, suddenly you had a lot of very valuable cards in your collection. If you had bought any number of these cards and sold them at that $20 peak, you made bank and had some funds that you could then reinvest into the hobby, which is the goal when you do this type of thing. But unfortunately, for every Ledger Shredder, there's a million different times where a spec can come crashing down. There are some games where this doesn't really work at all, in fact. For example, a game like Digimon or Union Arena doesn't have the player population to cause these intense spikes and then have demand at the spike price. That's the key distinction here. We're not talking about whether or not you can sell the card itself, we're talking about whether or not it'll have the volume needed at the peak to sell through all of the copies that you have. You can extrapolate that from sales data on TCG Player for any card that had a sudden spike after a tournament in any of the smaller TCGs that are out there. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule, but if you're playing a smaller game, buying out a card can oftentimes lead to you sitting on stacks and stacks of different copies of a card that ultimately won't lead anywhere for you because they won't sell at their highest price, so you'll be left selling each individual copy as the card goes back down in price, down to what you originally paid, ultimately meaning the spec was not worth anything. You'll be stuck holding the bag, and the card either won't move or will sell at the low point, like I said. There's also the idea of risk versus reward. If you're going through a bulk bin at an LGS and see 10 copies of an NTG rare at 25 cents, that's an easy buy, but at the same time, what card is it? How long has it been at the bulk rate? What would it take for this card to go up? How many printings are there of it? Spec smarter than I did is the point that I'm trying to make. Take into consideration what you need to do in order to successfully liquidate the cards you buy with the intention of selling later. Do it for the right reasons, and make sure you're playing the type of game where demand for the card you're buying will sustain at its buyout prices and therefore make it worth it to you. And of course, don't do this in a way that harms your community. Make sure that you're not buying out all the copies of a card that everybody in the room needs. That's not what we're going for. What we're going for is a fun way to engage in the hobby that allows you to reinvest funds so you can buy more cards. That's the goal of all of this. Number 2, practice proper etiquette. This isn't something that I've ever had to deal with personally, fortunately, but I see it all the time at events that I've run in the past, both at Cards HQ and elsewhere. Oftentimes, newer players or players returning to the hobby don't understand the heuristics that come into play whenever you're at locals, playing in a tournament, and interacting with your fellow players. There's an etiquette that needs to be observed, with a few key pieces to keep in mind. The main one is that you always want to offer your opponent the chance to cut your deck whenever you're shuffling, an opportunity to reread your cards in the instance that they don't remember or don't understand something that's going on with the way your cards interact, or in casual circumstances specifically, offering them a chance to take back an action if it didn't impact the board state majorly. The last one in particular doesn't apply to hyper-competitive events, of course, where takebacks are definitely not allowed, but I'm more talking at a local level where things are supposed to be casual. It's important to understand the experience level of the people you're playing with and respect that some folks just don't have as many reps as you might have. The hope is by doing your part in maintaining a friendly, casual environment at a local game store and making sure that you're accommodating to all of your opponents that you play, you're fostering an environment that all other players can enjoy, and it leads to an environment where everyone can have a good time, thus growing the hobby. And finally, the big one that I want everyone to take away from this video is going to be very simply, pace yourself. This has always been my personal problem. I played card games a ton when I was younger. We're talking middle school days, when I was barely in high school. I had no money to spend on the hobby at that time, and when I started playing seriously again, I had a job and I was working around cards a lot, so I decided that I wanted to buy a case of every product that came out for my game of choice at the time. At the time, this was Yu-Gi-Oh!, and so I set up a deal with my boss, the owner of the LGS I was working at the time, to sell me a case of product, 12 boxes, for every Yu-Gi-Oh! Set that came out. This is a prime example of me not pacing myself at all. And it was a great way to end up with many boxes of bad bulk from sets I probably didn't want or need that I only opened because I felt an impulse to open all the new products that I could because I didn't want to miss out on any cards. Even though there's opportunities to grow this hobby from a playing, collecting, and investing standpoint when you open boxes, this type of behavior is something that not only I participated in and got dealt a bad hand with, but many people I see across the dozen TCG communities I interact with all the time also do this. When they do this, normally these boxes provide them with a lot of bulk and not even necessarily playsets of the cards that they were looking to get out of the boxes in the first place. You don't need to do this, I promise. The money that is invested into a case of product can be invested better into singles, playsets, and supplies, things that genuinely help you enjoy the hobby more. This is our inherent goal with this video, and when you're trying to get back into cards, you want to enjoy the hobby more. Opening boxes, while not necessarily a problem in and of itself, should be done in moderation, and you should be prioritizing using your dollar to buy things that will help you do this goal. Be smart about where you choose to invest your hard-earned money when it comes to furthering your ability to engage in this hobby. It took me about 7 sets deep of cracking cases to realize that I did not need to do this in order to get the cards I needed and do what I wanted to do the most, play the card games I love. And those are my 5 mistakes I wish I knew sooner when it comes to getting into the TCG industry. What did you think? Are there any you disagree with? Any I didn't bring up? Feel free to throw those in the comments down below. If you liked this video, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to TCG HQ for more TCG content from a variety of your favorite games, including MTG, Star Wars Unlimited, Gundam, and many more. And on top of that, if you're interested in checking out any of the supplies I talked about in this video, be sure to go to cardshq.com where you can get yours today. I'm Nick with TCG HQ, and I'll see you next time.